I have been here on YouTube for going on close to 6 years now, talking about the comic book industry, what's going on, the things that are plaguing it, why it's not in a healthy state right now. You know, a lot of people have mocked me. A lot of people said, that Wes, he just doesn't know what he's talking about. And now, 5 years in on it, I love seeing all my opinions parroted back to me by CBR and Screen Rant and all these shill media websites that apparently are being forced at gunpoint to actually be honest with all the things that are happening. One of the things that I've certainly keyed in here on the channel, I don't talk about it every day, but certainly at least once a month, is how politics, specifically the politics of the writers, are absolutely turning readers off left and right. It is an enormous reason a lot of people have just left American comic books in the rearview mirror. They just can't take it anymore. And there's actually an article from CBR.com. Holy shit, they actually fucking said it, that maybe incorporating too much politics could be not good for your comic book, or maybe making every character in your comic book have the exact same political views and identities might not be the best thing for the comic book industry. I've only been talking about this for 5 years. We've only had your boy Zach talking about this for like 7 or 8 years. Doug Ernst has been talking about it for 7 or 8 years. Obviously, EBS and a lot of other people that have been critics, skeptics of the comic book industry and saw what was happening today and how bad it is. I just covered it last week. How we got here, one of the big reasons is nobody can fucking stand this stuff anymore. And my goodness, I can't believe CBR, and I believe the writer is Ashley Land, actually said something that kind of makes sense. I don't believe Ashley Land nails the landing on this article and doesn't really identify all the issues that are out there, but they certainly capture enough of it to where we can have a good discussion here. My goodness, CBR is finally coming back to reality. The comic book media was always a way for writers to examine humanity through the various superheroes created for fans. Both Superman and Captain America have had some classic adventures during World War II, and politics, albeit at a basic level, was always a part of their stories. In fact, these heroes became national symbols of patriotism and Americana thanks to their tendency to adopt popular causes of each era. While the ethics of some of these heroes has changed, for example, Superman's shift to political neutrality, others have maintained their beliefs throughout comic history. However, the modern age of comics has made the mistake of assigning most heroes the same safe politics despite their histories that reflect very different beliefs. Yes, they have decided to remove, in some cases, the soul of the character out and replace it, and this is where the article really misses the mark so badly, with the soul of the writer, as if anyone ever read a Superman comic book because they wanted to find out what Tom Taylor's beliefs were on climate change, as if anybody ever read a Batman story so they could find out what Tom King really thinks about, I don't know, the justice system and stuff like this. And you take these pieces of what makes a character who they are and why they resonate with fans. You don't always agree with your heroes, but you always understand where they come from, because that means that you've actually written a fully fleshed out character where the reader understands where they're coming from and they understand when things make sense. And almost nothing makes sense with a lot of these heroes in 2023, and it's certainly been happening for quite some time. They don't feel authentic. They don't feel real. It doesn't feel like any of the ways that they act or any of the things that they believe in today have anything to do with the history of who they are and where they came from. And you and I know, being fully fleshed out human beings that are adults that have actually had lives led, that those things absolutely do play a part in what you believe in, what's important to you, and how you think about certain things. And all these writers, because they absolutely suck, they cannot do it. They cannot force themselves to write a character that doesn't believe exactly how they believe. And that's how you know they're hack writers. And that's one of the big things that this article absolutely misses on. But they do continue and make some really good points. In the modern era, the topic has become increasingly homogenous to the point where it's a dull and predictable subject. Virtually all heroes, in as much as they voice their beliefs, seem to mostly agree, even where their history should suggest otherwise. Thankfully, most comics don't address real-world hot-button politics much and focus on stopping villains like Joker and Green Goblin. However, virtually all major superheroes have become fairly muted and safe. Rather than heroes like Wally West or Green Arrow forcing the Justice League into arguments, it's hard to find vocal, popular characters with consistent philosophies. And I think they're pretty wrong on that one, because we are seeing a lot of real-world hot-button issues forced into comic books. We're not dealing with the Earth that we live on when we open up our comic books. We're dealing with Earth Zero, Earth Prime, whatever you want to call it. And when you open up a Marvel comic book, you're dealing with the Marvel 616 universe, or perhaps another multiverse. There are far too many multiverses, but that is a video for another time and why I hate multiverses so much. And these worlds are distinct and different from ours. Sure, a lot of the characters might share the same values, and there might be things that happen in these worlds that are similar to ours, but they are not whole cloth the exact same thing. So when you open up, I don't know, a Hawk Girl #1 and you see Black Lives Matter protesters, it feels a little weird. When you go and you read that final issue of the recent Batwoman run, we might not get another one now because this one was so bad, from Cecil Castellucci, and it's just Barbara Gordon walking around Gotham wondering why she has all this white privilege and seeing all these protesters and joining in and stuff. It just feels so weird. And we never get those great moments, like Denny O'Neil's Hard Traveling Heroes, where you've got Green Arrow and you got Green Lantern working together, but completely at odds with each other in certain parts of their lives and what they believe in. And that made for compelling reading. It made for compelling characters. It made for compelling heroes' journeys as you saw them working together, even though you knew they didn't agree on everything. And that was perfectly fine. But the writers nowadays cannot bring themselves to actually have a hero that they're supposed to be writing and spotlighting as being good, not agree with them whole step on everything. They cannot remove themselves from the heroes themselves. And I don't think the heroes are too safe. I don't think they're too predictable. I think the problem is they aren't themselves anymore. They don't feel authentic. They never feel real and true to who they are for the most part. Yes, you will get some outliers here and there, like maybe The Flash from Jeremy Adams, who was a complete unknown until a couple of years ago. I didn't know what he was going to be able to do when he came to DC Comics, but it turns out he actually likes the characters. He goes and studies them, and then he writes a story that makes sense for the character, because he's not there to actually tell you what Jeremy Adams cares about or what Jeremy Adams believes in. He's actually there to highlight what Wally West cares about, what Wally West believes in, because that's the most important part. No one buys a comic to find out what Vita Ayala cares about. No one buys a comic to find out what Jerry Duggan cares about. No one pays their hard-earned money to find out what T. Franklin thinks about anything. Like, no one comes to this stuff from a perspective that, oh my goodness, what is Scott Snyder going to teach me about life today? No, I want to hear about Batman. I want to see adventures that make sense for that character because he's the actual beta vet. The article continues. There's a key difference between a character's political party and their underlying philosophy. Marvel's and DC's worlds are entirely distinct from our own, and this makes discussions of real-world politics and their realities far less compelling. Political philosophy, on the other hand, is about defining heroes' core beliefs and motivations in ways that can speak to a reader without dividing them. Heroic pairings like Batman and Superman, Iron Man and Captain America, and Green Lantern and Green Arrow are also well established as philosophical foils for each other, where one hero typically leans toward the scale of liberty, the other one usually favors security. And those make for really great stories. What's the last probably truly great story that has happened at Marvel Comics on a big scale? Yes, there have been some great stories for a smaller subset of characters, maybe a solo here and there. I guess we could say House of X Powers of 10, but before that, it's Civil War. Why? Is it because people hate Captain America and support Iron Man? Is it because people hate Iron Man and support Captain America? No, it's neither. It's because you took these two characters that people love, that do have different points of view on the world, you brought them together in conflict that kind of made sense, although they kind of made Iron Man the bad guy of that one, and he might not have really recovered from that one. But they brought them into conflict with each other, and you had a story that was compelling, made sense, and really it didn't just divide audiences. You had to pick a side, right? But it divided the entire Marvel Universe because there was an issue that made sense in the Marvel 616, the Superhero Registration Act, which we wouldn't have here in our world, right? Because we don't really have superheroes. Why would you need a Superhero Registration Act in our boring, mundane world, but in the Marvel 616 where it's actually interesting, and that really makes sense. It makes compelling stories, and it's bigger than life. It actually accentuates the characters and shines further light on them in a moment of discovery of who they are and what they stand for, and you actually end up growing the character. And even if you disagree with Captain America or you disagree with Iron Man, you can understand where they're coming from, because in that world, it actually makes sense. Whereas in our world, all the stuff happening here, it doesn't really make sense in those worlds. Does it make sense that in a world with Mr. Terrific, the smartest man in the world can do anything, that climate change would be a problem. Not really. Why would that be such an issue in that universe when you had somebody that theoretically should be able to solve it? And if you were going to do it in the Marvel 616, you'd have Moon Girl and Shuri do it together because they're the smartest people in the history of the world. And maybe Amadeus Cho would help them out because there's so many super geniuses that can actually fix every problem that's going on there. Obviously, everyone knows that Mr. Terrific and his T-spheres would be able to solve all that stuff. And there are so many characters in both universes that would be able to solve the very mundane issues that we have in our world, that it doesn't make anything compelling about the story, and it no longer informs you about what the character believes or what the character's about or what their core components are. You end up being informed about the writer. And that's really where this stuff all falls apart. Can you have a politics in comic books? Absolutely. We've certainly had political undertones or even political conversations in comic books. Alan Moore did it pretty damn well with Watchmen. Now, he certainly had a point of view that I think he didn't like one side, but he presented them in a way to where you could understand where both sides are coming from. And as an informed reader, you could come to your choice on what you thought was right and wrong. The writers, the publishers really no longer think we're smart enough for that. They think they need to tell us exactly how we can and cannot feel when it comes to these situations. And it's absolutely bullshit, and it's made a lot of these comic books absolutely unreadable for the last 5 years or so. This is the final thing I'll talk about from the article. Comics aren't a good platform for escalating political arguments or even particularly good places for promoting any specific political theory, since they can evolve into propaganda without warning. However, superheroes are more interesting when they have strong opinions. While heroes like Superman and Spider-Man have mostly become unifying neutral figures, it's also good to know that heroes can have deep personal philosophies. One of the things that has really made the American comic book industry hum, when it is humming, and it's not right now, is because, yes, you get into your comic book, your 22 pages of absolute bliss, when it's a good story, and you get a full story from beginning, middle, to the end, but you also get those little nuggets, those little tidbits that inform you about the character, what they believe in, what's important to them. And over time, you develop a personal relationship with them, even if you agree with them or not. If you go back and read those old school Amazing Spider-Man runs from like Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, there's a lot of stuff in there, and they're always giving you a reason to invest not only in Peter Parker, but Spider-Man, Mary Jane, and all the other supporting characters within a comic book. And that's why you stick around for 40 years. Because you've developed that personal relationship with the character itself. When those things are wholly removed out of the character and replaced with the mouth and the feelings of the writer, you no longer feel that attachment to the character anymore. And thus, you no longer have a need to go back to your comic book shop and pick that comic book up every single Wednesday. And that's happening basically across the board at Marvel and DC Comics. Just think about Superman, Son of Kal-El. We get in the second issue, John Kent, Superman sitting on the moon, talking to his father. Tom Taylor, the writer, doesn't believe Superman has done enough, even though he saved the world countless times. So he has John Kent, an established character that we've known for about 6 years at that point, saying stuff that you would never imagine would come out of his mouth. Why haven't you ever tried harder? Why haven't you ever done more to help the world? To Superman. To fucking Superman. Could not believe you would say that. And then Superman said, never sounded like him for an instance, I always really felt like I was an outsider and I didn't feel like this world belonged to me or I belonged to this world and I didn't want to interfere. But, you're from here. You'll be able to do more. The dumbest shit in the history of the world. Didn't sound like either character. What happens when that moment happens? I get on YouTube. I tell everybody, this is the kind of bullshit that I'm talking about. And then, of course, John Kent is no longer fighting villains or whatever. He's fighting climate change. He's fighting immigration issues and all these things that are happening in our world. And I can see them every single day on the news, or I can go read news websites if I want to. And they got away from actually having superhero stories. And you wonder why 3 years later, John Kent as Superman is not taken seriously. No one calls him Superman. He is John Kent. He will never be Superman because of the damage that Tom Taylor did when he decided John Kent didn't deserve his own voice. John Kent didn't deserve his own personal beliefs, and they didn't need to resonate with the readers anymore. You no longer needed to invest in John Kent as a character because you weren't reading John Kent anymore. You were having to invest in Tom Taylor as a person, and that's something I'm personally not willing to do. And that's one of the things that was missed in this article, but is at the core of why this is absolutely blown up in the faces of DC and Marvel Comics. I had a really good conversation a while ago with my friend Aaron Sparrow, and we talked about, yeah, there are politics in comic books, and it doesn't have to ruin everything, but politics can absolutely ruin any comic if you don't know what you're doing and you do it the wrong way. If you haven't seen this video, I definitely invite you to check it out right now. There's also a link in the video description.